Nobody expected this voice to be the one saying it. Not today. Not after years of doubt, criticism, and side-eye commentary. But when Skip Bayless opened his mouth after the Browns' matchup with the Buffalo Bills, the entire NFL conversation shifted in real time. Because this wasn't a casual compliment. This was Skip hedging or playing both sides. What he said about Shedeur Sanders caught fans, analysts, and critics completely off guard. A guy known for tearing quarterbacks apart was suddenly calling what he saw a future franchise leader, and that alone should have stopped everyone in their tracks. But here, where it gets interesting, the praise didn't come after some flashy stat line or highlight reel performance. No monster yardage, no viral touchdown throw. What Skip pointed out was something most box score watchers completely missed. Command, toughness, control. The kind of stuff that doesn't trend on social media, but wins games long term. And yet, even after all that, the reaction online was split. Some fans leaned in, saying, "Finally, people are seeing it." Others immediately moved the goalposts. Suddenly, the same performance that impressed one of Shedeur's loudest skeptics wasn't enough. That's when the conversation stopped being about one game and started becoming about something bigger. Because while Shedeur was getting picked apart for every mistake, another quarterback across the league struggled badly and barely caught any heat for it. Same position, same league, totally different treatment. And once you notice that contrast, you can't unsee it. The question is whether Shedeur played well. The real question is why performances like this are judged so differently depending on the name on the jersey. And what comes next in this story? That's where things really get uncomfortable for a lot of people. When Skip Bayless speaks, people listen, whether they agree with him or not. That's exactly why his reaction after the Browns faced the Buffalo Bills landed so differently. This was Skip doing what he usually does. There was no backhanded compliment, no setup for a takedown. Instead, he said something that instantly changed the tone of the conversation around Shedeur Sanders. Skip didn't talk about hype. He didn't lean on narratives. He talked about what he actually saw on the field. Control, poise, toughness. The kind of quarterback traits that don't always jump off the stat sheet but show up when the pressure is highest. And that's what made this moment stand out. Because Skip has built a reputation on being brutally hard on young quarterbacks, especially ones who come into the league with attention already attached to their name. What really caught people off guard was how definitive he sounded. He didn't say Shedeur could be something one day. He didn't hedge. He flat out described what he saw as a franchise quarterback in the making, coming from almost anyone else that might have blended into the daily sports noise. Coming from Skip, it felt like a line being crossed. He pointed out how Shedeur handled a red-hot defense, how he kept the offense moving even when the game didn't go perfectly, and how he responded after taking hits that would have rattled most rookies. That matters, especially against a defense known for capitalizing on mistakes and forcing young quarterbacks into bad decisions. And yet, despite all that praise, you could almost feel the tension online. Because the moment Skip said it, the reaction split down the middle. Some fans saw it as validation. Others immediately went into denial mode. Suddenly, the goalposts moved. Now efficiency wasn't enough. Now toughness didn't matter. Now the focus shifted to what Shedeur didn't do instead of what he did. That's when this stopped being just another post-game take. Because when even one of the loudest critics acknowledges what's happening and people still refuse to listen, it raises a bigger question. Was this really about performance at all? And once you start asking that, the comparison that comes next becomes impossible to ignore. This was the part that somehow got lost in the noise. The game itself. Because when you actually slow it down and look at what Shedeur Sanders was dealing with against the Buffalo Bills, it paints a very different picture than the one floating around online. Buffalo didn't walk into this matchup cold or vulnerable. They came in hot, confident, and aggressive, with a defense built to confuse young quarterbacks and force mistakes. Exotic looks, disguised coverages, pressure from unexpected angles. This is the exact type of defense that usually exposes rookies. And early on, you could tell they were testing Shedeur, trying to see if the moment would speed him up. It didn't. Instead of forcing throws or panicking when plays broke down, Shedeur stayed patient. He took what the defense gave him. He moved the chains. He kept drives alive. No hero ball nonsense. No reckless decisions just to chase stats. And that's why the box score doesn't tell the full story. This performance wasn't about gaudy numbers. It was about control. Then came the moment that could have derailed everything. Shedeur took a hit, banged up his hand, and had to leave briefly. For most young quarterbacks, that's the point where things unravel, timing gets off, confidence dips. But when he came back, nothing changed. Same calm, same command, same willingness to stand in and deliver throws with defenders closing in. What made it even more impressive was what was happening around him. The Cleveland Browns weren't exactly operating at full strength. Key pieces went down. Momentum swung, and yet the offense kept functioning. That doesn't happen by accident. That happens when the quarterback understands the situation, manages the game, and keeps everyone locked in. And here's the part critics conveniently skipped: third downs, sustained drives, long possessions that kept Buffalo's offense off the field. Those things don't trend on social media, but coaches and defenses feel them. That's how games stay close against superior talent. Still, instead of acknowledging that, many brushed it off. Nothing special, just average. As if performing calmly and efficiently against one of the league's toughest defenses is something anyone can do. But that reaction says more about expectations than performance. Because when a rookie does exactly what he's supposed to do in a difficult spot, and it still gets minimized, you have to wonder what people were really hopping to see. And once you start asking that, the focus naturally shifts to the mistakes, especially the ones critics were waiting for all along. If you want to understand what kind of game Shedeur Sanders actually played, don't start with highlights. Start with the drives, because drives don't care about narratives. They don't care about opinions. They show you who's really in control when the pressure stacks up. Against the Buffalo Bills, Shedeur wasn't handed short fields or bailout situations. He had to earn every inch. Long possessions, double-digit play counts, situations where one mistake ends the drive and flips momentum, and instead of shrinking, he settled in. Look at the rhythm of those possessions. 8 plays, 13 plays, 14 plays, 8 plays again. That's not luck. That's a quarterback reading coverage, making the right checks, converting on third down, and keeping the offense on schedule. That's command, especially against a defense built to bait young quarterbacks into bad decisions. Third downs told the real story. The Browns weren't surviving off busted coverages or blown assignments. They were converting in predictable situations when the defense knew a pass was coming. That's where poise matters most. One rush throw, one bad read, and the drive dies. Shedeur avoided that trap over and over. And context matters here. This wasn't a perfectly functioning offense humming along. Injuries hit, personnel changed, momentum swung, yet the Cleveland Browns kept operating. That doesn't happen unless the quarterback is keeping everyone aligned. Calls in the huddle, adjustments at the line, calm when things get messy. Even the red zone sequences revealed something important. Decisions were deliberate. No panic throws, no forced hero plays. When points were available, they took them. That's game management, something young quarterbacks rarely get credit for because it doesn't look flashy. There was even frustration sprinkled in, especially with play calling near the goal line, something fans immediately pinned on Kevin Stefanski. But instead of letting that derail him, Shedeur stayed locked in. Next drive, next read, same composure. This is the part critics gloss over because it's harder to dismiss. You can nitpick throws, you can isolate mistakes, but sustained drives against a disciplined, opportunistic defense, that's evidence. That's the difference between surviving a game and actually running it. And once you accept that those drives were real and intentional, the conversation shifts. Because then the focus moves to the mistakes everyone rushed to amplify and whether they actually tell the whole story. This is where the conversation predictably took a turn. Because no matter how steady the drives were, no matter how composed Shedeur Sanders looked for most of the game, critics were waiting for one thing: the interceptions. Not to analyze them, but to weaponize them. On paper, 2 picks looks bad. That's all some people needed. But when you actually break them down, the story changes fast. The first one didn't come from panic or poor vision. It came on a timing play, a quick throw out of the backfield that arrived slightly behind the target. Not perfect, but also not reckless. The ball hit the receiver's hands, popped up, and landed in the arms of a veteran safety who makes a living off tipped passes. That's football. It happens. Was it a mistake? Yes. Even Shedeur would tell you that. But mistakes aren't all created equal. This wasn't a forced throw into triple coverage. It wasn't a late read. It wasn't a quarterback guessing. It was a young player learning how tight the margin for error is at this level, especially against a defense like the Buffalo Bills, which thrives on capitalizing off the smallest missteps. The second interception followed a similar pattern: pressure, a defense sitting on roots, a moment where the window closed faster than expected. These are lessons rookies have to experience firsthand. You don't learn them in practice. You learn them in live reps against elite competition. What got lost in the outrage was how Shedeur responded. No visible panic, no unraveling, no trying to get it all back with a reckless throw. He came right back out and ran the offense the same way he had before. That's the difference between a quarterback who's shaken and one who's learning in real time. And here's the part nobody wants to talk about. Plenty of all-time great quarterbacks struggled with interceptions early in their careers. It's part of the adjustment, the speed, the disguises, the bait. Defenses at this level are designed to trick young quarterbacks. Falling for it once or twice isn't a red flag, it's a rite of passage. Yet for some reason, when it comes to Shedeur, those moments get magnified, zoomed in, replayed endlessly, stripped of context, as if the rest of the game didn't exist. That's why this narrative feels less like analysis and more like expectation policing. Because when a young quarterback plays efficiently, controls the game, and still gets reduced to a couple of mistakes, it raises a question. Were people actually watching the game, or just waiting for a reason to say, "I told you so"? And once you ask that, the comparison that follows becomes impossible to ignore. This is where the conversation gets uncomfortable, because once you put the 2 performances side by side, the reaction around them doesn't line up. While Shedeur Sanders was being dissected play by play, another young quarterback struggled mightily, and most people barely blinked. That quarterback was Jaxson. In his outing against the Minnesota Vikings, the results were rough. Minimal production, little rhythm, constant pressure, sacks piling up. The offense stalled early and often, and by halftime the numbers told a brutal story. It wasn't just inefficient, it was non-functional. And yet the reaction was calm. Excuses came quickly. He didn't have time. The scheme didn't help. The matchup was tough. All fair points, by the way. Quarterback play doesn't exist in a vacuum. Context matters. But that's exactly the issue. When those same variables apply to Shedeur, suddenly context disappears. His offensive line struggles, ignored, injuries around him, downplayed, the quality of the defense he faced, barely mentioned. Instead, the focus shifts immediately to flaws, holding the ball too long, not doing enough, not being the guy. It's not about tearing Jaxson down. This isn't a personal comparison. It's about how differently the same position is evaluated depending on the name, the narrative, and the expectations attached before the snap even happens. One quarterback gets patience, the other gets pressure. Some fans online have pointed this out, and while it's mostly speculation, the pattern is hard to ignore. When a quarterback is labeled a project, struggles are framed as growth. When a quarterback arrives with buzz, confidence, and expectations, every mistake becomes evidence against him. What makes this comparison sting even more is that Shedeur's performance objectively kept his team competitive against a stronger opponent. Long drives, third down conversions, poise under fire. Dart's outing never found that rhythm. And yet one is treated as understandable, while the other is treated as disappointing. That disconnect is what fuels frustration among fans. Not because one quarterback deserves praise and the other doesn't, but because the standard keeps changing, quietly, conveniently. And once fans start noticing that the bar moves depending on who's holding the football, the conversation stops being about stats and starts being about perception. Because if two quarterbacks can deliver vastly different results and receive opposite reactions, the question becomes unavoidable. Is this really about performance, or about who people decided to believe in before the season even started? At some point, the conversation stopped being about throws, reads, or box scores. It shifted into something less visible, but far more powerful: perception. And when it comes to Shedeur Sanders, perception has followed him long before he ever took an NFL snap. There's been a lot of online buzz suggesting that Shedeur entered the league with a target already on his back, not because of his play, but because of the expectations attached to his name. Fair or not, some fans and analysts seem to decide early on that he'd need to prove more, do more, and be more consistent than other young quarterbacks just to earn the same benefit of the doubt. That's not confirmed fact, but it's a pattern many people believe they're seeing. Confidence plays a role here too. Shedeur has never hidden his belief in himself. He speaks with certainty. He carries himself like he belongs. For some audiences, that's leadership. For others, it's interpreted as arrogance. And once a quarterback is labeled the confident one, every mistake gets filtered through that lens. Suddenly, errors aren't growing pains, they're character flaws. Then there's the draft narrative. When a quarterback isn't taken where some expected, that story sticks. Instead of being evaluated weekly, they're constantly being relitigated. Every performance becomes a referendum on whether teams got it wrong. And when Shedeur plays well, it's minimized. When he slips up, it's amplified. That cycle feeds itself. There are also whispers, again, speculation, that certain media spaces simply feel more comfortable rooting for quarterbacks who fit a familiar mold. Quiet, low profile, easy to project onto. When someone breaks that mold, the response can turn harsher. Not always consciously, but subtly. And that subtlety is what makes it difficult to call out. What's undeniable is how narrow the margin feels for Shedeur. He can manage a game efficiently, take hits, lead long drives, and keep his team competitive, yet still walk away with people questioning whether it was enough. Meanwhile, others are allowed entire seasons of patience under the banner of development. That difference in tone doesn't come from film study alone. It comes from expectations set long before kickoff. And here's the irony. The very traits that cause some to judge Shedeur more harshly, his confidence, his resilience, his refusal to flinch, are the same traits teams spend years trying to develop in quarterbacks. Which raises the final, uncomfortable thought. If the standard keeps changing based on who's under center, how many performances like this will it take before the conversation finally catches up to what's happening on the field? By the time the final whistle blew, it was clear this conversation was never really about one stat line or one afternoon of football. What unfolded went deeper than that. Because when someone like Bayless, a voice known for skepticism, steps back and acknowledges what he saw, it forces people to confront something uncomfortable. Maybe the narrative hasn't matched the reality. What Shedeur Sanders put on tape wasn't perfect, it wasn't flashy, and that's exactly why it mattered. He managed the game, he absorbed pressure, he responded to mistakes without unraveling. He led sustained drives against a defense designed to break young quarterbacks mentally. Those aren't empty reps, those are foundational moments. And yet the reaction told its own story. Even with progress clearly visible, the debate immediately shifted to what he didn't do, what he didn't throw, what he didn't finish. As if growth only counts when it looks spectacular. That response revealed more about expectations than execution. This is where the bigger picture comes into focus. Young quarterbacks are supposed to develop in stages. Control first, confidence next, explosiveness later. But with Shedeur, those stages are being judged out of order. He's expected to skip steps others are allowed to take slowly. That's not analysis, that's impatience. There's also a quiet irony here. Teams and analysts constantly say they want quarterbacks who are tough, composed, and unshaken by adversity. That's exactly what showed up on the field. Yet somehow, it still wasn't enough to shift the tone for everyone. That contradiction is hard to ignore. What makes this moment matter is what it signals moving forward. If performances like this continue to be dismissed, then the discussion was never about football alone. It was about comfort levels, preconceived ideas, and narratives that are slow to die. But if the film keeps stacking up, those narratives eventually run out of room. Because football has a way of correcting the conversation, not all at once, not loudly, but steadily, one drive at a time, one response to adversity at a time. And when that happens, opinions don't change because they want to, they change because they have to. So maybe this game won't be remembered for the score, or even the stats. Maybe it'll be remembered as the moment people realized the conversation needed to evolve. Because if this was just another game, it wouldn't still be sparking debate. And if it was just hype, critics wouldn't be scrambling to explain it away. And the more that keeps happening, the harder it becomes to deny what's unfolding right in front of everyone.